Lead from the Side is made possible thanks to our incredible sponsors. Hi, I'm Spencer Kassimir, and this is Lead from the Side. Back in April, I had the opportunity to sit down with Raelene'e. Raelene'e is best known for her leadership roles in rugby league and rugby union, along with netball and other high-performance sport. She is currently Group Chief Executive at Sport New Zealand and High Performance Sport New Zealand. We really got to go into depth on how she was able to overcome many challenges in each of these roles and what she's done since. I hope you learned as much as I did. Last time we chatted, you were heading over to New Zealand, but in other things that are coming up, you have the ICC Women's World Cup at semifinal stage. You'll be hosting the Women's Rugby World Cup in October this year. You're going to be co-hosting with Australia the FIFA's Women's Football World Cup mid next year. And just recently, you've come off I'm pretty sure that was the most successful Winter Olympics in New Zealand's history, as well as Paralympics. So you're busy.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about being administrator is I'm not sure how busy you are when it comes to Olympic medals. That's a chance to really sit back and, recognise that there's lots of people that touch those athletes that get to that stage. But it's certainly exciting. As you say, semi-finals completed, facing a final on Sunday. Australia, clearly an incredible story around women's sport, the Australian women's cricket team, and how they've matured and grown and taken fans on a journey to get involved with women's cricket. Hagley Park will turn it on, and it's been a great event and really raised the profile of women's cricket in this country.
And tying in women's cricket, their landscape for pulling more and more women's talent towards rugby league, rugby union, and now also Australian rules football with their expanding landscape is quite challenging, though. Would love to get your thoughts on how we maintain talent in women's cricket as well as netball now that there's that many more choices.
Spencer, for me, there's a really clear baseline, and that is that you have to give the athletes the best possible chance to be the best athletes they can be. So the start point is coaching, nutrition, strength and conditioning, time to be able to dedicate to their role or whatever sport that they've chosen to be part of. Then ultimately what follows is the commercial backing. And there is no better example than cricket, to the point where, yes, they're not at the level of the men's yet, but they're at a level where they can sustain very healthy and successful careers. They've made some great decisions about bringing the boundaries in, about altering the game around the ball weight and size. And I'd really continue to encourage sports to think about that as they're trying to develop the sport into a commercial place. I'd really admire what cricket have done to get their sport to that level.
Let's talk about you, how you started and your story.
Sure. So I went to Auckland University, did a Bachelor of Commerce in, interestingly, marketing and manufacturing. The first opportunity that popped up was actually with Fuji Xerox, and started off in marketing, went into sales, came out of there into some sort of more general management type roles, running teams. And so then, from there, worked on a private venture, capital funded out of New York project to build a telecommunications submarine cable between Singapore and Sydney, which was going great and was amazing until two planes flew into the World Trade Center. And the project literally collapsed within 48 hours. So I went from employed in Singapore in a very, very large queue trying to get on a plane to get back to New Zealand to having no job. Have to pick yourself up and, find the next opportunity. And I did a number of sort of corporate roles, Southern Cross Healthcare, into BNZ, credit cards, into Spark, or Telecom as it was then, but it's now called Spark, into a couple of different roles. And then I was driving down the road and I heard that the CEO of Netball New Zealand had resigned. Was fortunate to get in the shortlist and then got appointed. And I walked in the front door and I felt like I'd come home. Yeah, found a place where I could bring my deep-seated passion and experience, personal experience and family experience for sport. Yeah, I just loved it, and had 6 years there, and it was truly special to be part of something that took women's sport and put it on the map trans-Tasman-wise and turned it into a semi-professional competition that was, in everyone's homes for 16 weeks a year. So it was great.
And that's the thing. You were the one who was there essentially joining, in many ways, two different competitions between Australia and New Zealand. What's the story behind innovating that sort of, work together strategy?
Actually, a lot of that consultation work was done before I arrived, and with some great ladies who I'd call my good friends these days. And it was hard because, as I say, to people, it's like sleeping with the enemy, and that's quite a big leap because, to actually work together to form a joint venture company together, to actually bring together, share sponsorship deals, share revenue, all of those things are really big challenges when you're in a joint venture. One of the really smart things they did was they had a 6-person board. And so it was basically everything had to be negotiated and mediated to an outcome, which I think is a great learning and something that was really smart in the way they structured things. And, it really did, as I say, took, many young women and made them household names.
But this is actually segueing really nicely. And so what were the hurdles that didn't allow this to perpetuate any further? And because we have two separate competitions now in netball.
Yeah, and I think, like everything, it's all about the people, isn't it? And we call it in New Zealand, he tangata, he tangata, he tangata, which is it's the people. And, there was a change in personnel at Netball New Zealand. There was a change in personnel in Netball Australia. And ultimately, there was some financial challenges for the competition. There was a disequal contribution from Australia and New Zealand. New Zealand had been the higher contributor of financial, the broadcast rights were coming out of New Zealand. So ultimately, those big strategic decisions about what was right for two countries ended up being a big barrier, and they decided to go back to two competitions. I personally really disappointed about that. I think there was a lot of work and to get to that stage. And, even now when you think about the competitive landscape of AFLW and NRLW and the like, they don't have genuine trans-Tasman competition. So that could have been a unique selling point for netball. But, there's still two great competitions that go on in both markets and still continue to raise some really good commercial dollars with that.
I think you could tell I have a real love for netball, even though this is something I wasn't raised with. We talked about this when you were giving the Tom Brock lecture, but the idea is quite uniquely different to something like, let's say, women's basketball in the US, the WNBA, where the game is, basketball essentially as played by the men's, whereas netball has a very separate and unique identity between sports.
Yeah, which I've always been a huge advocate for, is that it's its unique selling position and that it has no men competition. So the women athletes are the best athletes in the world at that sport. And there's not that, apart from artistic swimming, which is the new name for synchronized swimming, I can't think of another sport that's played internationally, really, that only women do. And I know there's a few gymnastics things, rhythmic gymnastics and stuff, but it is as a team sport like that. Now, it's really interesting in a modern world, is that netball's under huge pressure to make sure that it's got a genuine men's game and a men's pathway. And you kind of go, hang on, for 100 years we've had men's codes with no women's, equal. Netball's had an opportunity equally for women. Where do you actually then think about a male game? Which holds its opportunities back to be part of the Olympics, where you need equality. It probably doesn't quite get played by enough countries at the really elite level, and it doesn't have a genuine men's product, are the two pieces of feedback we keep getting. I don't know if that's changed, it's a wee while since I've been there, but that's an interesting challenge for the powers that be at netball in these modern times.
That's actually quite fascinating. If my daughter chose to play netball, I'd be quite happy with it. The capacity is there, but for these things that you're outlining, it would be interesting to see programs into the US where there is a population that could be assisting in that sort of thing. But then at the end of the day, do you still have enough competitive nations to do so? But let's continue on. So you're at netball and then the NRL. Let's talk about that. What's that evolution like?
Yeah, my dad played rugby league for New Zealand. I'd sat with him and watched Winfield Cup games, every Sunday for my formative years. I had a deep understanding and respect for the sport, and I needed a new career challenge. And sequencing as it was, ended up in the process to be appointed into the Bulldogs role, the CEO of the Canterbury Bankstown Bulldogs. about 4,000 applicants, which was the greatest gift that they could have given me to go through a process that was that robust and that large. Meant that there was no sort of tag of tokenism or there wasn't any of that. It was a genuine belief that I had the skills and capabilities to do the job, and had 4.5 years there. It was truly amazing experience. It's a club that has great history, amazing fans that come from as multicultural background as you could possibly imagine. And it's tough. Rugby league's a tough sport. It's tough on the field. It's tough off the field. It's very blue collar and its supporter base. There was lots of challenges in stepping into that role. It was more high profile. The media overlay was more complex. I'd walked away from my network here in New Zealand, where all those safe places to go and have conversations. I woke up in Sydney one morning and thought, goodness me, here I am. Who do I ring when I need help? I was lucky to quickly, make some friends and some good colleagues to be able to work through that. But personally and professionally, it was an amazing time, and there was certainly some really big challenges along the way.
Because you're speaking at the Tom Brock is a time that, and the content to which you spoke about was something that really stuck with me. Two separate stories going on at the same time. What happened in the club, the players' embrace for you. I remember you telling them when they started calling you auntie, how much, not just emotion, but how much trust and faith that the players and others in the club had with you, but then also putting up with the, frankly, what I would call abusive sledging that, well, all of us face, but you more so being a public figure through online media. What is that like, having those two separate experiences that couldn't be more disparate?
Well, you actually raised exactly the point that I don't think people realise. The world of social media is not the world that you live in every day when you tune up to the office, and you can't make it so. And equally, the people on social media don't see what's going on in the office and on the field and in the gym and in the environment and the work that's actually going on. So it's life. When it gets really serious, though, which it does, you do need an outlet. You do need a safe space to have a conversation. And the way I always think about it is that I've got 4 or 5 trusted advisors. And if those trusted advisors tell me that I've got it wrong, that's when I have a sort of a sleepless night and, where I get a bit, that anxious feeling. But if some person in the Twitter sphere, gives me a hard time about something, you just have to shrug your shoulders and let it go. But if you ran strategy through Twitter or Instagram, your strategy would be zigzagging all over the place. So you do have to get that balance right.
I remember you talking about your relationships with Des and with Todd Greenberg at those times, and also just the risk involved that you took in pioneering, and I do say pioneering, just education towards domestic violence and the partnerships that you made there, entrepreneurship within a culture, not just a sport.
Yeah, and that's a really interesting one that you raised. Actually, we formed a partnership with White Ribbon, which is the Women's Domestic Violence Unit in Australia, and when we did it, people said to me, "You're mad. You're absolutely crazy. You'll have a domestic violence incident inside the club, and then you'll look like idiots, and you'll be like, what were you thinking?" And the answer was, well, what it did by partnering with them is it taught us a lot of things. It helped educate our players. We had training for them. So, it ended up being a really good thing. And certainly the education and knowledge of the club around the challenges of domestic violence were much stronger because of that relationship. And it is something that I'm really proud of.
Yeah, well, there's nothing like putting a name to something to make that heard. Not just heard, but talked about.
And, you're talking about intergenerational domestic violence. It's terrible, it shouldn't happen, but it's about being in an environment where it can break that habit and people can have honest conversations around that not being acceptable behaviour. And so actually being able to be part of that journey and be able to be part of that learning was really great for the club. And certainly at a time where it had some challenges, it put it in a much stronger place. There's no doubt about that.
So it doesn't have to be that way. So it doesn't have to be rugby league forever either. You make it over to Rugby Australia. Walk us through that, because that's its own journey.
Yeah, I mean, it was an amazing opportunity, a genuine international sport, an international team that has enormous profile and respect on the world stage, the Wallabies, launching with a women's competition and international women's rugby, some real opportunities in the game. So it just, to me, it looked fantastic. Once again, an interview process that was openly talked about as being much more rigorous for me because I was a woman than if it had been for just a man, and the chairman's on record with that. Good place to start. There was some real opportunities in that environment, certainly around some free-to-air broadcast coverage, which is not something that rugby had ever had since it had gone professional, and building a high-performance network where a young boy or girl could see their pathway into the Wallabies or Wallaroos up and through Super Rugby that was joined up. And actually, that is not something that rugby in this country had ever, and it is what the most successful rugby countries in the world have had for a number of years.
So last time we got to really sit down, not that we haven't spoken since then, but you were leaving Sydney and you were heading off to New Zealand. Let's talk about going home. What's going on and what have you been up to?
Yeah, so Greg and I loved our time in Australia. We had 7.5 years there. It was fantastic. We made lots of great friends. We had amazing experiences, but it was only ever an adventure for us. It was never the place that we were going to be permanently, and sort of halfway through a crazy COVID environment, we decided to head back to New Zealand. And then Peter Maskinnon, who'd been the CEO of Sport New Zealand for about a dozen years, resigned. And so the opportunity became available. And that really appealed to me, whether it was in the community sports space where we want more people to be active and more young people to have opportunities, or whether that was winning medals on the world stage. Yeah, went through a process, got appointed to be the CEO of Sport New Zealand. And then not long after that, Michael Scott resigned as the CEO of High Performance Sport New Zealand. They put me in as the acting for both organisations, and then that got confirmed just in the last couple of weeks, actually. So now Group CEO of the Sport New Zealand group, and I'm really enjoying it. It's been an amazing 14 months, lots of energetic, passionate, incredible people that want to see good outcomes for New Zealand, and equally, there are some real challenges, as I said at the beginning of this chat, that COVID has created some challenges around physical activity for people and what normal looks like these days. So there's certainly lots to do. There's lots to keep me interested and inspired, and I'm really enjoying it.
I mean, you are by definition a pro pivoter to transfer and translate over multiple cultures. And I do think I should say that this is one of the more incredible stories to hear about, because it is an international story. It's a multi-code, multi-sport story, and it's still going. I guess to cap, 2 questions. So let's do the first one first. What's the toughest hurdle you've had to overcome in your career?
Yeah, it's a really good question. People will immediately look at the Israel Folau issue that I faced at Rugby Australia and go, well, that was the toughest hurdle. And sure, that was. Finishing so publicly at Rugby Australia the way I did, you have to deal with that and how you pick yourself up and go again. So, those are certainly 2 things that were publicly really challenging. It's about, your attitude and wanting to get out the best out of yourself. I mean, that's the only thing. People say, what's your aspiration? And I just say, well, when someone someday puts me in a box, I really just hope they say that she absolutely made the most of every opportunity. She was brave to step into opportunities when they were in front of her, backed herself to do them, and gave it absolutely everything. And I think in the experiences that I've had, I'd like to think that's what people would say. And they've all been amazing experiences. And what's different, they've all had the fundamental same element, which is that sport does great things for people. And I get a real kick out of that every day.
That's fantastic advice. And that actually segues to that last question. Is there anything you wish you knew sooner, advice that you would have had received earlier or put into practice?
Yeah, I think the thing that I wish I'd known when I was at school was that not the smartest people, the people that win ducks and the people that top in maths and English and science, aren't always the only people that succeed. Soft skills, EQ, strong leadership, ability to read the room, authenticity, all of these skills are equally as important in how you can build your leadership capabilities. And those are the skills that make up being a CEO. But the great skills you learn playing sport, the hard work, the people management, the negotiation, the failings, how you pick yourself up again, all of those good things are really great building blocks. And CEOs just aren't the smartest people in the room. In fact, they're often not the smartest people in the room, but they are the people that bring the team together that have the smartest people to get to the outcome.
It's funny. I'd never believed that you would have believed that about yourself or about others, but I guess you proved both myself and yourself wrong in every positive way. So I think that's a great way to wrap the show. I can't thank you enough. It is always a pleasure speaking with you, Raelene'e. So firstly, thank you for coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Spencer. It's great to chat again.
Thanks for listening today. Lead from the Side is made in partnership with Ample, and thanks to our sponsors. More information about the show and our guests can be found in the show notes. You can follow the show on Twitter or LinkedIn at Lead from the Side, or myself on Twitter or LinkedIn at BallsOutPhD. If you want to contribute to the show, send us an email at leadfromtheside@gmail.com. We look forward to hearing from you. See you next time, and remember to lead from the side.